In 1980, some rookie named Irvin Johnson would lead his Los Angeles Lakers to a championship in stunning fashion, birthing the Showtime Lakers. Yet he wasn't able to take home Rookie of the Year honors, which went to fellow nobody, Larry Bird. In 1981, the Hick from French Lick would lead his Celtics to the first of his championships. On the other side of the court, Moses Malone would carry a lowly 40-win Rockets team to a finals berth like no one would until the '07 Cavs and some other unknown from Akron, Ohio. Today, we look back at the 1981 Boston Celtics.
Yeah, the longtime rival of the Lakers, the Boston Celtics, have been patiently waiting for their time to shine. After seeing the Lakers win their championship, the Celtics were motivated to win under the leadership of their superstar Larry Bird, the frontman and defensive showstopper Robert Parrish, and floor general Tiny Archibald. This is the Pure Point Project.
Hey, there we go. And the 1981 Boston Celtics, we're doing our NBA in hindsight look back this time. And my counterpart here, Mr. Xavier Barnett, is a Boston Celtics fan, so we should probably lay that out on the table first off.
Yeah, there's going to be lots and lots of bias. So, sorry, but that's what's going to happen. I'm a big old fan, this is a big year for Boston, they have one of the greatest comebacks ever before winning the championship, and they were pretty cocky, right? I'm not going to lie, they were a 61-win team, I believe.
I think it was 62, wasn't it?
62.
Yeah. So either way, 62, 61, a lot of games to win.
Yeah. Pretty much almost like tied for the Philly 76ers, which is crazy when you think about it, because they were 62-20 as well, and Dr. J took home his one of his MVPs as well. So a little bit of a rivalry, and that's starting to come back in later years as well. 76ers and Celtics.
I think before we even get into the actual final series, we should probably talk about how fantastic this Eastern Conference Finals series was.
Yeah. You know what? Fair enough. You're right. It was insane. Like, that was a hard fought. The 76ers go up 3-1 in the conference finals, and everyone's like, oh, guess there's always next year. But no, there's never next year when it's the Celtics. They clawed their way back and were able to overcome the 76ers by winning 3 straight and taking home 3 straight W's, and then going to the finals.
And not only 3 straight, but 3 straight by 2 points or less.
Yeah, they're literally hanging on the edge. It wasn't it wasn't an easy affair, but they somehow pulled through, and that always makes for a good series, right? Every game being a nail biter.
Man, this series was just insanely close all the way through. Aside from the Game 2 standout where the Celtics managed to blow out the Sixers for their first win of the series, other than that, like, the scores were 105-104, 100-110, 107-105, 111-109, 198, and 91-90. Taking out that one blowout in Game 2. Like, that was a series.
Yeah, no, you can literally go either way. That's probably contention for maybe one of the best series of all time. Trying to think here. Yeah, probably top 5 for me.
Another amazing thing about it is that 3 of the 7 games in this series had people tie for the lead in scoring in the game. That's how well balanced everything was with these two teams too. It was another level.
Yeah, and it's funny because either way, it was so Philadelphia could have just gotten over there. Like, they was just so close. So it's also heartbreaking if you're a Philly fan for that 76ers. But there's always next year, and I'm pretty sure they won next year.
One big thing I noticed in this game is because since we've started doing this, we've seen a lot of Dr. J. He's been a focal point in this deal. By the way, I think it was 82-83 or something that they won. But I think there's like one more like Lakers win in between, but there's so many during this decade that it's hard to.
It's hard to count.
you just lose count at some point. Um, but we've seen so many of Dr. J throughout since we've started this that one thing really, and I want to see if it stood out for you as much as it did for me in this series, was watching Dr. J play. He almost looked like a completely different player than even the year before when we watched him in the finals. Like, now he's bringing the ball up the court. He's playing point guard half the time, it looks like, out there on offense. It's a different look for Julius Erving, and a different haircut, too, so to go along with the new look.
Yeah, I remember, I forget what this was, you told me off mic, though, but I remember you telling me Julius Erving, he had to figure out different ways to win, because the old way of playing his ABA style, it was good for the regular season, but it wasn't like good enough for playoff games, right? He had to totally revamp his game and switch it up. So I think this year's the turning point for him then, that we've seen.
I mean, it got him an MVP, so.
Yeah. And so this is when he starts to turning it around and changing. And that's what great players do, right? They're like, okay, so this isn't working. It's time to try to switch up my game, right? If you want.
Exactly like what we just saw with The Last Dance with Jordan when he decided he needed to put on weight to finally beat the Pistons.
Yeah, right. The people that want to be champions, it's not everyone has that in their blood, right? Some players are a little bit lazy and just rely on their natural talent and not change anything. But some players, like the Jordan, the Dr. J, the LeBrons, they try to look at, even the Kobe's, they look at everything else and see what they can do,
Andrew Wiggins has left the chat.
Yeah, no, that's not. Man, Andrew, don't even get me started with that guy. He had so much potential. But yeah, the great players, they'll do edit. They'll try to switch their game up, right? So it's always good to watch. That's what it kind of makes you more of a fan, right? It's better basketball that way as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's better basketball when everything's flowing, right? When the team just looks like everything's working properly. And it's hard for me to say that this team looked better than last year's team that obviously was in the finals representing the Eastern Conference the year before as well. But it's just Dr. J kind of evolved maybe, and it might be the fact that too this was his 30th birthday, right? Like he just turned 30 this year. Usually when your kind of athletic prime starts to dip a little bit, and he had to make up for it, and he did clearly, because he led his team back to the Eastern Conference Finals with what I would say might overall possibly be a little bit worse of a team, but still a 60-win team in the regular season.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he where there's a will, there's a way up into the conference finals, unfortunately, and if this was probably any other year, he probably would have been champion, but
and I mean, credit where credit is due, because that series gave the Celtics more of a trouble than the actual finals series did.
Yeah, the actual finals. I mean, it started looking like they had a little bit of a trouble, but then around the next couple of games, I'd say the last 4 games, the Celtics start taking it too, and then just going using their. I guess this is the first time I kind of heard this introduced, but like the birth of the fast break offense, which is sometimes a joy to watch, but sometimes you'd see these crazy long football type passes, which were just pure giveaways. I don't know if you know.
I feel like it's less the birth of the fast break offense and more Larry Bird just was on another planet when he decided to make some of the passes he made, which a lot of times turned out fantastic and are still some of the biggest highlights in NBA history. But other times, not so much, I mean, Tom Brady's thrown some interceptions, right? So
yeah.
being the best at something, and I still to this day probably think that Larry Bird is the best outlet passer I've ever seen in the NBA.
Well, that's fair. That's actually, I never looked into that, so that's actually, I'll accept that a compliment for Larry Bird since he's a Celtics player.
Getting that, like, there's that really famous full court pass from LeBron to Dwayne Wade and that everyone, that was, Larry Bird was like doing that weekly.
Yeah, I think everybody on the side. I've seen Robert Parrish do it. I think I've seen Maxwell do it too. like it was.
Hey man, put some respect on the MVP's name.
Yeah, Cedric Maxwell was like, he was playing out of his mind in that Western Conference Finals. I mean, NBA Finals. Just watching him, it was a great feel.
Yeah, and definitely something that was completely kind of unexpected the way his previous series had gone.
Yeah,
but he comes in.
He wasn't.
Yeah, it comes in, takes the load from Larry Bird a little bit there, and ends up taking home that Finals MVP. And now forever on Larry Bird's resume is he didn't win Finals MVP in his first Finals win. I wonder if that angered him in the Magic Johnson debate early on.
Maybe it could have.
Magic got that Finals MVP the year before.
Yeah, Bird had a couple of games where he only scored like 8 points in that series as well. So
honestly, they played really good defense on Larry Bird.
Yeah, they were. But the thing about Bird is we all know that he doesn't, which is what the announcers say as well, is that he'll find another way to win. Like most players, that kind of separates another thing that separates the good players from the bad, from the selfish players is. They don't care about their stats. They find a way to win. Like, I'll give you an example, like Tom Brady. You know, if a team's weak against the run, he's going to run the ball. He doesn't care about his stats, even though the stats are still high from longevity of playing, you know. But he goes for the win. Most players will go for the win. So he's like, where does my team need? So he still dominated those games where he only scored 8 points. He was dominating on the boards and in the assist column as well, I believe. So.
Larry Bird was always more of a pass-first guy on offense, right? He's looking to get other guys involved, and they have what's it called? Is it the Gordie Howe assist in hockey, where it's the second man gets the assist or whatever? Is that what they call it? I know in hockey they give 2 assists out, right? The last 2 people to pass the puck before it. Larry Bird kind of, if that in hockey was called the Gordie Howe assist, then, which don't quote me on, I think it was, I'm not 100% sure. But if that was called that, then that secondary assist would be called the Larry Bird assist in the NBA.
Yeah, no, for sure. Some of their offensive, like their offense was a thing of beauty to watch. Like some of the passing, I remember, I forget, it was in Houston, but I believe Larry Bird had the ball. He passed it to I believe, trying to see here. I think Chris Ford. I think it was to, I can't remember the play. I'm so terrible at it. But I want to say he passed it to Robert Parrish, who was about to go dunk, but then he slid it to the side and passed it to Chris Ford, who went for the layup.
And the best part about when you see Bird make plays like that too is if you watch closely, he'll make the first pass to someone else, and then he'll point the guy to where he needs to pass the ball next.
Yeah. It's always good, and the one thing we also forgot to mention is we started seeing more 3-point shots being taken, which is weird. Another weird thing is no one did the 3-point shot. They just kind of let them shoot it, unless it was Chris Ford. But I remember a lot of the times say if a team was down by 3, they wouldn't even think about doing the 3-point shot. They all just went for the 2-pointer. Which was very interesting. I'd noticed that teams are down by 3. I'm like, oh, just make a 3-point play, and they're like, nope, we're gonna score it and then foul and hopefully he misses and everything like that. But it's still the 80s. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, of the 2 finals teams, I mean, clearly of the people on the court, Mike Dunleavy was the best actual 3-point shooter. As done by the fact that he took 15 3-point attempts in the playoff run that year, which was the lead on any of these teams, made 6 of them. respectable, 40%. But 6 for 15 is a game now.
Yeah, yeah. So people chuck them up like it's nothing, and a lot of players are expecting to make those 3-point shots, right? But yeah, at the time, the teams are still getting used to it. They're all about taking still drive it up the middle, try to take open shot, try to take the smartest shots. More and more teams, though, I've started to notice are starting to use the mid-range jumpers a little bit. I saw flashes of it. I wouldn't say it's there yet, but you would see flashes. Like Tiny Archibald did a lot of mid-range jumpers, and so did Cedric Maxwell as well, and even Robert Parrish. He was doing some mid-range jumpers as well, which was strange.
Well, the '80s to the '90s was the golden age of the mid-range game in the NBA, right? Like Larry Bird was the best at it early. And you had, obviously, Michael came into the league, and Michael is probably the best mid-range scorer in the history of the game, right? Most of the famous shots you see Michael Jordan take are mid-range jump shots, right? So
Yeah.
he's that guy. And obviously just based on MJ's popularity alone, that carried through all through the '90s, and when everyone else started coming into the league, you had guys like Allen Iverson who were mid-range killers. Tracy McGrady coming in the league was a mid-range killer. It kind of took over the league for a while there, and it was the way. It was for the longest time between the '80s and the '90s, and even into the early 2000s a little bit. The mid-range jump shot was considered the best shot in basketball. It was considered the most efficient shot in basketball, right? Because you could get it off quickly. Most people shot it at a decent percentage, right, compared to the 3-point shooting at the time, and that before we got into today's league, where all of a sudden everyone, if you shoot under 40% from three, it's bad now, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was like if you shot 33% from three, it was you were decent, right?
You're considered a 3-point specialist, pretty much, right?
Exactly. Look at Antoine Walker. You would fire threes all day long, shoot like 26%, but whatever. Just tossing up those threes. But yeah, the mid-range game for the longest time was considered the way to go in the NBA until we've gotten to this recent metric era where everyone's like, the mid-range jump shot is the worst shot in basketball, It's weird to see how that evolved.
Yeah, games always change, right? It's and that's a good thing, It kind of keeps the sport interesting. It keeps it alive, Some people, I don't want to sound like those old guys waving the stick, like back in my day, the mid-range jump shot was the best shot, and I'm sticking to it. That's my story, right? A lot of people try to, put it down, but like think about it. If you're scoring half of your 3-pointers, it's going to be 3 points is more than 2, so I can see why they're going more 3-point route.
I think one of the things, though, I miss about the dominance of the mid-range game is it was just prettier,
Yeah.
People, like the moves they would make just before the shot, the off-ball guys who would just catch and shoot off a screen right away from the elbow and stuff like that. You can't do that kind of stuff as much from the 3-point range. It's a lot more just catch and shoot, period, right? Or maybe like one dribble move around a screen, take a shot. If you're James Harden, a step back, or Luka Doncic. But back in the day, there was all these moves that people would use to free themselves up to get that little bit of space to get that mid-range jumper off, and it was prettier basketball in my mind.
You know what? I don't blame you on that. And I don't disagree as well. Now that I think about it, you don't see that nice little fadeaway, like the little twist on your pivot foot and then fadeaway jumper. Oh my goodness,
the disco Dirk.
Yeah, right. Like that shot was insane, right? Or like a crazy crossover, or someone gets crossed like crazy and then you just do a little bit of an off balance shot. So it's I agree with you on that. It is a prettier shot, but people don't care about pretty. They want to win. So I guess they shoot threes now.
Well, they should have. They should have probably cared about pretty a little bit more because this was the second lowest rated in terms of TV ratings NBA Finals of all time after 2003, which was, the Spurs, right? Nobody's excited to watch the Spurs. So,
yeah, I feel bad.
So the second lowest TV ratings that any NBA Finals has ever put up in this game, which is weird because it's the finals immediately following that ridiculous Magic Johnson finals that was just fantastic, right? And brought so many people to watch. It's kind of a good thing that it was so bad in terms of the ratings, though, because it did make it was one of the contributing factors, at least, in making it the very last NBA Finals to be played on tape delay. Which means from here on out, people around people around North America, the U.S. actually got to see it live, other than just the people, in Boston or in Houston.
Oh, that's good. Could it be because of Houston? They I think, the reason why the ratings was pretty low is probably because of the storyline.
Oh, yeah.
Boston.
Everyone thought Boston was just going to take it, right? Like, if you look at the TV ratings, the Sixers series before was pretty decent, right? Like, if that was the final series, it would be respectable, right? But I think you look at the Rockets coming into this, and not a lot of people gave them much of a chance, They're a 40-42 team. Just one of only two teams in NBA history to make the finals with a losing record. And they were led by one guy, pretty much, right? Like, it was impressive, don't get me wrong, but Moses Malone's playoff run that year was, it was LeBron-esque in the way he carried that team to that finals berth. And they get there, and it's kind of just like, yeah, Moses Malone is great, but it's kind of hard to be just Moses Malone competing against Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, Nate Archibald. Like, this team had 4 Hall of Famers.
Yeah, and he did take games away from them, though. That, to be fair, he was such an offensive force that a lot of people had trouble guarding him. Right? He draw a lot of fouls. I believe I saw. I remember Robert Parrish. And it was 2 games where he'd have 4 fouls, and it wasn't even the second quarter yet, in 2 games. So that was it did, I guess, sort of help him, but like you said, it kind of just gets overwhelmed. You have 4 future Hall of Famers versus 1, maybe. I don't know. It's not going to go so well.
And not only is it 4 future Hall of Famers, but 3 of those Hall of Famers were A, in their primes, B, very good at defense, and C, played small forward, power forward, and center, and Euro center. So you're crowded by 3 of the best defenders of all time, essentially. I say that Kevin McHale wasn't, that great, but when you have Larry Bird over there to provide help defense and Robert Parrish behind you, that's Kevin McHale's more than enough.
Helps a lot.
Yeah. And it's just, he was such a beast on the offensive boards, Moses Malone. Every time I look at Moses Malone's career stats, it just boggles my mind how much better of an offensive rebounder he was than maybe anybody in the history of the NBA. 'Cause you had a stretch from 1977 through to 1980 where he averaged more than 6 offensive rebounds per game every season. He had 2 seasons during that time where he was over 7 offensive boards per game, playing all 82 games in the season. 7.2 in 78-79 per game, 7.0 in 79-80. That is mad. How do you get that many offensive rebounds and only pick up 2.6 fouls per game?
Yeah. I don't know. He was drafted right out of high school, so he was a little bit special.
To be fair, he was drafted into the ABA right out of high school, so is not exactly being brought into the NBA right off the bat. He did have 2 years of a kind of a warm up in the ABA before he got into the NBA. I say that it sounds disrespectful to the ABA, but the NBA post-ABA merger was the best players from both leagues wedged into one, right? So the competition level went up. There's no doubt in that.
Yeah.
The other thing
No,
about
for sure.
Moses Malone that is mind-boggling for a guy his size, he never really missed games until he was 37 years old. Like, the dude played 82 games in a season or more because ABA rules. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times he played. Sorry, 10 times he played at least 81 games in a season.
Yeah, 10 times. Not to, and then he haven't even added the times where he played at least 70 games.
Oh man,
70 games, right?
over
So,
70 was aside from his second year in the ABA, when we all know the ABA had these weird struggles, so they had to like disband half the teams in the league. So that year doesn't really count. It's kind of out of his control, that kind of stuff that year, right? But if you take out that year, it was, there was only one season in his first 17 seasons in the league, or 16 seasons in one of the two leagues, when he had less than 70 games played. And that was his first full season in the NBA, when he played 59 and was a friggin' all-star with 6.4 offensive rebounds and 20 points per game.
Yeah, he was a beast. You could tell he was a beast. And it was like on the boards, he just had a physical presence about him. And honestly, if I was Robert Parrish, I'd just be annoyed trying to defend him because he was just hungry, and you could just tell he could just manhandle and power his way through to get the boards and everything like that. And it helped a lot with the second chance points, and I think that's how Houston in game 2, Boston was ahead by I believe 17 or so. They're crazy ahead, but then what happened in Houston? Well, what happened in Boston is Moses Malone just kept getting those second chance points after they missed, and then they just got dominated on the boards and picking up fouls on Malone as well. That's another thing I thought he was really good at, just drawing fouls and not getting much fouls for himself as well.
And that's the most impressive thing,
plays.
is the guy was inside dominating all the time and just never managed. Maybe how many times in his career did he have more than 3 fouls per game average? His rookie season, that's it. He never after his rookie season did he average, never after either rookie season. So his rookie season in the ABA and his rookie season in the NBA, he averaged over 3 fouls per game. But after that, never again, which is absolutely bonkers for a guy that's grabbing that many offensive rebounds inside and is playing such good defense and, getting around 2 blocks per game every year.
Yeah. Yeah, most players don't pick up fouls like that. That's high basketball IQ play right there, Or so it's crazy that he was able to dominate like that. And you haven't even mentioned his defensive boards were impressive. Well, not crazy impressive, but yeah, he's also impressive for getting his defensive boards as well, right? So
I'm never as impressed with defensive boards though. It's yeah, they're important. So the way I kind of look at the rebounding is, for a role player, I value defensive rebounds a little bit more than I do when it's a star, right? Because the stars, I value the offensive rebounding more, just because they're usually, they're doing a lot of work to get those boards, especially when they're the focal point of the offense and teams are legitimately planning to try to stop them from doing that, and they're still doing it. Right? Whereas on the defensive end, usually if you're a great player on your team, you're usually pretty good at defense too. So you're usually relied on to be guarding another, good player on the other team, right? So a lot of times you're preoccupied when that defensive rebound goes up, right? You're trying to either still play defense on that guy, or you're boxing him out, which is a fight because usually you're both good players, right? And so somebody else is getting those defensive rebounds, right? It's the Russell Westbrook, Steven Adams effect, right? Steven Adams was a way better rebounder. He would get all those offensive boards, but on the defensive end, he just boxed out his guy and let Russell get the defensive boards.
Yeah, Fair enough. Well, that's a fair point.
In no way am I implying that Russell Westbrook is a role player, by the way.
No, but he does. That's how he gets his stats, though, right? His triple double stats. Mhm. But yeah, another thing that's pretty interesting is just the amount of like. This was a little physical. This one, especially game two. I know Cedric Maxwell. He was playing with a rag up his nose. His nose was bleeding, and he does that thing that I don't know if you ever did this when you were younger, but when I was a kid and I was sick and my nose was stuffed up, I would like put a tissue to block off my stuffed nose and then just breathe through the one that was the good nostril. Um, Seeing Cedric Maxwell with that,
Isn't that like the opposite of what you're supposed to do? Like, wouldn't it be a better idea to block off the one you can breathe through so that you can clear out the one you can't?
I did the total opposite. That's why I was probably never worked properly.
That's why I had a stuffed nose my entire childhood.
Yeah, I used to do that for some strange reason. And then just seeing Cedric Maxwell with that on his in his nose was pretty funny. But I was just thinking, I'm like, isn't that like
MVP Cedric Maxwell?
Okay, Finals MVP Cedric Maxwell. Who's the Boston fan again?
Hey man, I'm rubbing in the fact that it's not Larry Bird.
All right, fair enough. But yeah, it was just one thing I was like questioning was I'm like, is that like sanitary? Like, what if he just like falls off and he just starts bleeding everywhere, right? I thought it was weird. Usually they kind of like.
I have an interesting observation about Cedric Maxwell career-wise. Actually, I have two interesting observations I want to put out there. 2 seasons, he led the league in field goal percentage, playing small forward.
Oh, wow.
Those same 2 seasons, he averaged over 3.5 offensive rebounds per game, playing small forward.
That's crazy. Okay.
The craziest part after those 2 is the second observation, which is the fact that from 1977 through 1985, Cedric Maxwell started at small forward for the Boston Celtics, who had a man named Larry Bird, whose natural position is small forward. And so they respected this dude enough that he got to play small forward, and Larry Bird had to move to power forward.
Yes. Is that the first like iteration of small ball?
Well, to be fair, Larry Bird was 6'10", so.
Oh, it says 6'9" here. Well, 6'8", 6'9". So they're not that much taller, but Larry Bird had good defense, and I think he could pretty much defend most positions. So fair enough, you know.
Oh yeah, Larry Bird was a great defender, and that's all fine and good. It's just some observations about Cedric Maxwell that you wouldn't think when you hear the name Cedric Maxwell.
Yeah, no, for sure. I didn't even know that. That's interesting. I just thought Larry Bird was the small forward the entire seasons, but I guess not.
The shooting percentage thing blows me away more than anything, though. To lead the league in shooting percentage as a small forward is pretty crazy. Because normally, it's the guys like Moses Malone that are leading the league in shooting percentage because they're taking all of their shots from within 3 feet of the rim.
Yeah, so that's impressive. You know?
Also, 9.9 rebounds per game in 78-79 as a small forward.
Holy, this guy, he did see, I'm not gonna lie, like watching the finals MVP Cedric Maxwell, he does look like, there were bursts where he just looked like he was the best player on the court sometimes. You know, he was just everywhere, doing everything, grabbing a board, setting up an assist, taking a shot, defending the best player, making a very clutch steal. He was kind of just all over the place, which was pretty interesting. So now that you made those assumptions, it kind of makes sense that he would. He seemed to be like one of those players that just kind of, those workhorse players that just do everything they can and they're just all over the place like that. That's Cedric Maxwell. Like, be beyond a role player, a little bit.
Yeah, the
Well, he is
other
beyond. He's Finals MVP.
exactly. Finals MVP, Cedric Maxwell. The other guy who similarly, on the other side of the ball, kind of did the same thing as Cedric Maxwell in kind of blowing your mind and how much he mattered in the series is a guy who was not named Moses Malone that if the Rockets had pulled out and won this series, could have been in the argument for the Finals MVP, and that's Robert Reed.
Yeah, Robert Reed. His defense on Bird was pretty impressive. He didn't get a lot of there wasn't too much double team for him as well, so he wasn't he was kind of guarding him all by himself. I think the only issue was sometimes his shooting was not in the last couple of games, his shooting he just could not get anything going offensively, but everything else he was just putting in the work for. Like we said, offensive workhorse. He was all over the place, steals, guarding Bird, which is a very tough ask, and just going ham, helping Moses Malone out. Also forgot to mention another player that kind of really stepped out and really helped a lot was Mike Dunleavy. I think in it was Game 4. He just went off. He scored 28 points and just really got all the offense going, and the whole Houston crowd were just loving it. They were just screaming his name. And one last thing I also want to mention because I have this in my head right now, but I want to mention best hair goes to Billy Pultz. His hair was just killing me. I was just he kind of looked like He-Man, but with brown hair and just totally massive, this brown bowl cut. I was just couldn't stop laughing at it. It was great. So he had the best hair.
Robert Reed's stats in this series: 15 points per game, 7.5 rebounds per game, 3.2 assists per game, an even 2 steals per game, and nearly a block per game.
Yeah, the man did it all for that series.
And to put that into perspective for his whole year a little more, that season and how good of a kind of secondary role player he was for Moses Malone, that season averaged 16 points, 7.1 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 2 steals, and nearly a block per game, which are nearly identical to the numbers he put up in the finals.
Yeah, no, he put in the work, it's the thing that I noticed though, which was kind of Robert Reed was always there to defend, but some of the players when the Boston Celtics were doing their fast break, a lot of the players were slow to come back. Even Moses Malone sometimes, you'd see there was a lot of 3-on-1s, 3-on-2 situations with Boston Celtics when they were running up the break. They'd get a steal. It was that's something I kind of noticed. Houston was a lot more slower, and Boston was a lot more faster and quick paced. And I found the team that won was whoever got their pace to go. When Houston forced Boston to play a little bit slower, Houston was always in control. But when Boston forced Houston to play catch up, that's when Houston started making mistakes. The turnovers come up, and they would, and then Boston would end up winning the game and get a 20-point lead or everything like that. Because then they just started blowing them out the water.
If without looking, if you had to guess, how much would you say Moses Malone weighs?
I want to say 235.
Moses Malone was 6'10", 215 pounds.
The hell? No way.
That's because I looked at because you said about Moses Malone maybe seeming slow coming up the court, so I was curious. And I looked at his actual size, 6'10" isn't even that tall for the guy. I'd expect 7'1", 7'2" from a guy that was putting up the rebounding numbers Moses Malone did. But 215 pounds, That
That's not heavy at all.
that's like what Brandon Ingram weighs.
That's crazy. Because like he's 6'10", so he's like that's really well. It is. I guess we're still in that era where the players aren't as big yet. They don't start putting on, Shaq weight or Karl Malone weight or anything like that. But that's 215. I can't. I'm shocked. I thought he was a bigger dude than that. He kind of looked like he was just a big, strong dude. I don't know what happened.
So I was playing NBA 2K and simulating like a franchise mode thing because I'm a stats nerd like that. And I found out that you can put in old draft classes into the game. And so two of the draft classes that went in were Moses Malone's and Hakeem Olajuwon's, and somehow the two of them ended up on the same team. So as I was simulating the franchise modes, they won about 9 straight championships at one point.
Yeah, that's probably I wouldn't doubt it. That's like the real Twin Towers right there.
But it was like Hakeem Olajuwon was rated like a 99, Malone was rated like a 97, and then like their third best player was like a 78 because of the salary cap. But it didn't matter. You'd look at the stats at the end of the year, it'd be like 30 points per game for Moses Malone and like 32 for Hakeem Olajuwon. And like third best had like 9.
I'm trying to see when. So yeah, 82 season. He's gone.
Well, Olajuwon was drafted in 84 with Jordan,
84
right? He
is
was the number 1
so
pick in 84, so.
Yeah, so Houston traded or did Moses Malone leave in free agency to Philly.
Yeah,
and
Malone went to Philly in 82 so that he could win a championship with with Dr. J.
Dr. J. And then, Houston, they lost him 82. They never would have played together. It's interesting to see if they would have got a championship if both of them were on the same team.
I don't know if in the real... Well, then again, we did just talk about the fact that Moses Malone is only 6'10", 215. Maybe he could play power forward. But I was going to say, I don't know if in the real world the two of them could maybe work together. Like, would they be clogging the lane too much for each other and stuff like that? Both guys that are such interior-oriented. Like, neither of them was a guy that would pull the ball out a little bit further too often, right? Like, Hakeem would sometimes, but not often. And it jogs or brings to memory when the Raptors tried to do the whole Jermaine O'Neal, Chris Bosh thing, and it just didn't work because both of them played the same kind of style of basketball. It's one thing to have two big men that can work together, a la Shaquille O'Neal, Horace Grant, right, with the Magic. And it's another thing to have two guys that play the exact same style of basketball.
Yeah, if they play the exact same style, it's always kind of weird. That's why I thought it was kind of weird when Russell Westbrook went to the Rockets. Both of them, I feel like they both need the ball to be effective with Russell and Harden. So I'm not gonna lie, this season I didn't pay too much attention to. This is the first time in the year I was just kind of, and this was arguably the most interesting time for an NBA season because it seemed pretty interesting. But yeah, if they play the same style, I don't know if it gelled. Right, you want guys to complement each other.
I think it's easier to cover up when they're in the backcourt than it is two guys in the front court because they get in each other's way. You know, there's not as much space in the front court as there is in the backcourt, right? So when you have two guys that play similar styles in the backcourt, you can put them on opposite sides of the court, pass the ball around a little bit, work the ball inside some. But when your two main guys are on either side of the block and about 4 feet away from each other at almost all times, that means you got two defenders that are also within 4 feet of them at all times.
Yeah, and then it just gets plugged. So yeah, I see what you're saying. They're not going to have any space, and then that might draw more fouls. So.
So back to the actual series itself. Game one might have been the most interesting of the games in this series. Coming into this series, we talked about it before. Nobody really thought too much of this series. Like, they thought, it's a 62-win Celtics team that was the best team in the league in the regular season. Went through the playoffs pretty easily, aside from Philadelphia, going up against a 40-win Rockets team that lucked their way in and really didn't have a whole lot of challenge beforehand, too, because people overlook the fact that the series before, right, they played against another 40-win team, right? So no matter who wins that Western Conference Finals series, we have a 40-win team in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, and it's so they were gonna. Then most people kind of thought it was a write-off. They're like, it's still, Houston will just, get. Everyone thought the Celtics were gonna sweep. It was gonna be easy for the Celtics to just go in and just take control of the entire game. And yeah, Houston didn't really struggle too much against the Kings. The Kings only knocked off one game, whereas Boston was put to the test with Philly. I think they literally won a day before, and the next day the NBA Finals started. Don't quote me on that. I think I heard that, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, after that it was just kind of
another factor coming into the series was the fact that the Rockets had lost the last 12 games they played against the Celtics. They got swept the year prior in a series against the Celtics beforehand. I should note that this season was the first season that the Rockets were moved to the Western Conference. They were swapped with Milwaukee. The season before, the Rockets were in the Eastern Conference, so the Celtics played them before the finals, and the Celtics swept them 4-0. And then... What the heck was that? It sounded like it made the hang up noise. So I got confused.
No worries.
Yeah, so they swept them the season before. So there was a lot of storylines coming up to this to say that the Celtics were just going to dominate this. People were talking about coming into the game that it was the Boston curse against Houston, where Houston just couldn't win games against the Celtics. Moses Malone wasn't having any of that. Coming into it, he had an interview where he called the Celtics chumps coming into it.
Yeah, he said he could take 4 players off the street and beat the Celtics with those guys. They weren't. That's what he said. I guess he had to eat his words.
He did win 2 more games than people thought he was going to win in this series, so...
Yeah, good on him for that.
But yeah, so the game one, our good old pal, Robert Reed, is kind of the hero in game one. Puts up 27 points, but falls 3 points short of being enough to beat the Celtics at home in game one. But still, a 3-point win was not what people were expecting for game one coming out the gates here. A quick note too, Larry Bird had 21 rebounds in game one.
And Houston was leading that entire game. Boston really didn't start taking over, coming back till maybe, I think, 5 minutes till the fourth quarter ended. So it wasn't...
It was tight pretty much through the whole game, though, too. Like, the end of the first quarter was like a 5-point difference, and then they traded, 1-point margins in the second and third quarters, and then Boston just kind of paced them a little bit there in the final period.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was close.
Yeah, I think it was
second.
It was like 87-84 at one point or something near the end, and then Bird decided he was going to start making jump shots.
Yeah. Dude. That's when it was like, oh, here we go.
Such a ridiculous stat line that Bird finished game one with. 18 points, 21 rebounds, and 9 assists.
He was just all over the place in that game one. And Moses Malone was kind of struggling to get some things going. till probably, I think he didn't score until like midway through the second quarter in that game as well. So he wasn't getting his usual offense going, but that would change in game two when he starts drawing fouls. And the Celtics are leading most of the entire period of game two, but then the Rockets kind of take over and do a comeback win, and it's mostly the Celtics turning over and the offensive rebounds. The offensive rebound is what whoever got more offensive rebounds I found in the game 1 and 2 was like clear-cut win of the first two games. They were just creating so much second point opportunities, and teams they weren't prepared for.
And we talked too about how
Celtics and
we talked too about how important Robert Reed was to this team in this series, and he comes out in game 2, goes 0 for 7. So not great. I mean, their second leading scorer was Bill Willoughby, who I never even knew existed until this game. Calvin Murphy, who was a key cog in the series before, dropping 40 points in the final game in the final game of the Eastern Conference Finals, goes 4 for 13 in game 2. So Moses Malone was kind of left on his own here and managed to just do what he had been doing all playoffs long and just put his team on his back.
Yeah, pretty much. He just carried that game 2, just drawing so much fouls. I remember so many people were in foul trouble. I think Roby was, obviously Robert Parrish was as well. I want to say Kevin McHale had 4. Let me just put it back there. But yeah, it was Moses Malone just doing what Moses Malone does, just carrying his team for the win.
Unfortunately, he could not carry that over to game 3, where his team got embarrassed, and it was kind of the game we were expecting the rest of the games in this series to be. Final in game 3 ends up being 94-71. Moses Malone still does his thing, 23 points, 15 boards. His team decides they don't like to pass anymore, and nobody gets more than 2 assists in the entire game. And they just kind of just flop. Larry Bird, of course, puts up his first finals triple-double here in this one, leading the Celtics with 13 points and 10 assists, rebounds, 13 rebounds and 10 assists, but leading the game in scoring is finals MVP, Cedric Maxwell. Puts up 19, leads 6 Celtics, who have double figures in the game. Very good defense being played against Houston in this one. I think it's the lowest scoring, I think it was the lowest a team was held scoring in the finals since like 1955 or something like that, which was the first year of the shot clock, so that tells you something.
Yeah, I think there was like at one time, I think it was either game 5 or game 6. No, I think it was game 5. The Celtics were killing them again. Like they had a huge lead, and I think Houston almost tied for lowest scoring ever, which was like they were at 64 points. But I think they passed it, so thank God. But yeah, they were just started getting embarrassed. Another fun.
You're thinking game 4 there. They did. Game 4 ends up 109-80 for the Celtics, but it was that first quarter that was just embarrassing in that one. At the end of the first quarter, it was 34-19 for the Celtics in game 5.
Yeah, it's insane. What was I saying? Another fun fact is I think the Celtics won 7 straight games in a row at the Summit. So they never lost the Summit until I want to say game 4 or game.
Yeah, game 4. Game 4 they lost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which was a Mike Dunleavy show out. He comes in, puts up 28 points out of nowhere. Moses Malone putting up his usual 24 and 22. It was an offensive rebounding showcase, really, in this one. 28 offensive rebounds for the Houston Rockets in this game. 28 second chances.
Yeah, they got dominated in the boards. It was pretty pathetic watching, to be honest. Sorry. I just get there's the Boston Celtics fan in me that just got butthurt because they were doing so bad in the offensive rebounding. But yeah, they couldn't box anyone out to save their life. So many second chance points. Mike Dunleavy was just freaking on fire, scoring all over the place.
This is the most mind-boggling thing of this series for me, and you're going to think that, because we thought that it was going to be a blowout coming into this series or whatever, right? And it didn't end up being that way, that maybe the Celtics didn't live up to that. But this game that they lost shows you really just how much better than the Rockets they were, because the Rockets attempted 103 shots in this game. The Celtics attempted 74. It was a 5-point game. That's
insane.
It's mind-boggling that they would attempt almost 30 more shots and only get 5 more points out of it.
Yeah, the Rockets didn't take the best shots either. I found.
That's probably when you think about it though, that's probably got a lot to do with those offensive rebounds too, right? Yeah. Taking those terrible shots and just keep putting them up inside like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much what was going on. I remember in some sequences there'd be like 2, 3, 4, 5 second chance points, like just go like chances, like they'd shoot, throw it up, miss, throw it, grab it back, throw it up again, miss, throw it up, and then it'd finally go in. And then you'd see that a lot in a couple of the games, even the games that they would lose. I think the problem with Houston was just their offense. It was inefficient, and it relied on one dude. Yeah, pretty much. You couldn't do anything else, to be honest. And it really showed out in Game 5 when the Celtics decided they were going to start hitting some of those shots, and they end up with a 29-point victory in Game 5, thanks to Finals MVP Cedric Maxwell, who puts up 28 points and 15 boards in that one. Yeah, like I said, Cedric Maxwell, Finals MVP, playing out of his mind. Bird struggled in that game too. It's another impressive feat that shows how much better the Celtics were as a team. The fact that Bird did not play good in Game 5 and they won by 29 points. Yeah. Bird was, I believe, like a halfway. The thing is, I think they focused too much on Bird and didn't realize that it was more like of a team effort, because you had Tiny Archibald that could light it up. You had Chris Ford who could shoot. Robert Parrish, who was an offensive juggernaut as well as a defensive juggernaut as well, too, right? The one player show. It was a collective team effort. And this goes to show Larry Bird had a bad game, but they still lost by 29 points. Yeah, it was impressive that a team could take the win like that with Bird not really showing out. It's kind of funny that looking back on this, the Celtics were the home team in Boston, but really they looked like a home team in Houston, because Game 6, no question, coming into it, Celtics just take it. They end up winning by 11, but it didn't feel like an 11-point win. It felt like, it felt like a bigger blowout than that. Coming into the fourth quarter, it felt like these teams weren't really on the same scale as each other. I think it was like a 26-point lead coming into the fourth quarter, if I'm not correct. Well, the Rockets outscored them by 4 in the fourth quarter, which is nowhere near enough for what they needed. Obviously losing 102-91 behind 27 and 13 from Larry Bird. So obviously, if they figured him out the last game, they forgot about it very quickly. Yeah. But the aura is just, players find a way to get their points going, They might have a bad game, but then the next game they get motivated to go back. Maybe he took a page out of Jordan's book and remembered what happened and just said, you. Maybe Robert Reed said to Larry Bird, nice game, Larry. and then he just marked him down and decided to go off the next game.
And then, in probably the signature shot of Cedric Maxwell's career, Finals MVP Cedric Maxwell's career, drilling that deep three to put the Rockets away in the pocket for good. They're done. Seals the 14th championship for the Celtics, which is we're talking about 1981, so it's just insane. That's whole Bill Russell run where he's like, nah, no one else needs a championship. It's fine. I'm just gonna take 11. And finally winning one of my, I don't want to say favorite, but one of the guys that I feel gets overlooked far too much when you look back in the history of the NBA, Tiny Archibald, getting him his MVP, getting him his ring.
Yeah, I know this was kind of off air, but you're a big fan of Mr. Tiny Archibald from way back, because he used to average about 29 points a game, and then when he came to the Celtics, he kind of took a step back and kind of played more as a facilitator.
It's coming off an Achilles injury too, which at the time was a lot more significant than it is now. And an Achilles injury isn't exactly insignificant now, right? But for a lot of players back in the day, that was a career-ending injury, right? So you look at the first half of Tiny Archibald's career, right? There was one year in 72-73 when he leads the league in both scoring and assists. 34 points, 11.4 assists, 46 minutes per game that season, which is almost Wilt Chamberlain-esque. But through his first 7 years of his NBA career, 24.8 points, 8.0 assists per game. So clearly one of the better point guards in the NBA through the first, if not in the argument for the best over the first 6 years of his career. Comes back after the Achilles injury in 77-78, plays another 7 seasons in the NBA. He's down to 12 points and 6.7 assists per game. Still makes 3 All-Star teams, though, in that second half of his career.
Yeah. And he takes home a couple of champions. Takes home a championship as well, so good on him. It's sometimes it happens. At least he kind of stuck to it, because like you said, back in the 70s, those injuries are pretty much career-ending, but he still stuck with it and was able to come back and still be an effective player. Thanks to he's a point guard, so he definitely has high basketball IQ and everything like that going on. So as long as you have that, you can still stay in the game.
So we know the 80s was a decade of green and yellow. It was the Los Angeles Lakers, and when it wasn't the Los Angeles Lakers, it was the Boston Celtics. I just noticed something that I want to point out real fast, just because we did it with Moses Malone. Tiny Archibald was 6'1", 150 pounds.
Jeez. 150 pounds?
And he was playing in the NBA. He's basically my size. And he's like, I'm an inch taller than him and like, I don't know, 10, 15 pounds lighter, but I'm not a professional athlete. That's crazy. And I like the fact that if you go to Basketball Reference, fantastic site, by the way, everyone knows him as Tiny Archibald. His name is Nate Archibald, right? His real name, Nate Archibald. If you look at NBA Reference, it puts his real name as Tiny Archibald and his nickname as Nate.
Nate.
Which is how much this guy became known by his nickname.
Yeah. They even call him they put Nathaniel Archibald at the bottom too.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
But yeah, so that is the Celtics' first championship of this era. Like I said, it was either yellow or it was green. Most years of the 80s. We talked about, what was it, 8 years or something? They were one of the two teams were in that finals game or taking home that championship. There was 3 times when it was the two of them head to head. So it was an era that would be dominated by those two, and more so by 2 individuals. One Magic Johnson and one Larry Bird. Of course, coming into the league at the same time. Magic Johnson taking home a championship and a finals MVP during his first season in the league. Larry Bird comes in his second season, matches him with that ring, but of course, Mr. Cedric Maxwell takes home finals MVP, not Larry Bird. So Larry Bird would have to wait a few more years to try to match Magic on that front and end up having to play some catch-up himself, and we'll talk a little bit more on what happens through the rest of this decade and the years leading up to that year when we get back to you the next time on the NBA Hindsight. Until then, for Pure Point Weekly, or for the Pure Point Podcast and the Pure Point Project, my name is Jeff Blackman.
I'm Xavier Barnett.
And we'll catch you next time when we go to 1982.